Well, greetings and welcome to the Tolkien Podcast. I am your host, Larry D. Curtis, a longtime Tolkien reader and a journalist who has covered Tolkien-related content for 25 years now. Today's episode, the 6th, is all about the enigmatic Tom Bombadil. I will try to get right to the point with Tom, and I am also likely to court some controversy with this episode, with some strong opinions about him in adaptations of Tolkien's works. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, the place that just managed to lose the Sundance Film Festival, but I have traveled around the United States, to Oceania, and to Europe to give presentations on Tolkien, often for a fan website. I was also invited to be an embedded journalist on the set of the Hobbit films. Well, not only was I invited, I went. I was an embedded journalist on the set of the Hobbit films. I don't typically talk about my credentials, especially off the top, but we are finding a new and growing audience with each episode, so I figured it wouldn't hurt to take a moment to revisit who is behind the voice here. The hope is that this episode will be shorter than the others for various reasons, but I do seem to get carried away when discussing the works of Tolkien because I find it so interesting. I hope you find it interesting too. And by the way, thanks for growing the show. Each episode takes time and attention, probably more than it should. I'm sure there's professional and great podcasters who whip through these things, but that is not me. So I try to fit it in with the rest of my passions in my life and my creative works that I, want to make. And I'm trying to also feed myself and pay the rent. So all I hope is that somebody somewhere wants to take the time and listen when I invest the time to make these podcasts. By the way, you can contact the show via email. That email is TheTolkienPodcast@gmail.com. You can complain, you can say thanks, you can suggest things to talk about in the future, you can disagree. I just would love to hear from you. This episode has a sponsor, which is a first, and it's genuinely unique. And I will even say a special handmade Tolkien-related item. I'll be giving out a website and some details later, and I suspect at the least you'll want to write down and look up an exceptional piece of jewelry. It's funny to me that we write things down and we look things up, but that's English. That's what we do. Anyway, let's get on with the show. For those who may not know or may not remember clearly, in the Lord of the Rings books, I'm talking about books, Frodo and his Hobbit friends flee the Shire, and they make a series of stops on their way to bring and discuss the One Ring at the Council of Elrond. It's a series of scary things broken up by stops in safety. They call Elrond's house the last homely house. Well, there's other homely houses before that. So they find safety. They also find help, unexpected help, more than once. In fact, several times. In one of those stops, after Merry and Pippin fall asleep and get partially captured or consumed or eaten by a mean old willow tree, Sam and Frodo yell for help. And the topic of the episode, Tom Bombadil, shows up and, using the power of his song and his voice, sets the wee lads free, meaning Merry and Pippin. Tom takes them to his house, his safe house, his homely house, you might say, near the old forest for some rest and some reprieve. A reprieve, I believe is how we say that, and some rest. So they stay safely in Tom's house. They hear a bunch of stories. We're going to get some quotes. Then they leave, and then they need further rescue when they fall victim to a Barrowite, a scary undead creature with a treasure hoard. They sing a verse that Tom taught them, and once again, Bombadil shows up and sings the danger away. He also makes gifts out of some of the treasure, which means each of the hobbits leave the harrowing adventure with an ancient elven dagger. Tom sends him on to Bree. Now, if your exposure to Middle-earth is only through the Peter Jackson films, and there are lots of people like that, you don't know who Tom Bombadil is. Likewise, if you listen to the BBC radio play, there is no Bombadil. Further, if you were old enough or dedicated enough to have sought out the 1970s Ralph Bakshi animated Lord of the Rings film, no Bombadil. And by the way, I recommend all of those adaptations. if you haven't tried them, especially. Now, if you watched season 2 of the Amazon Lord of the Rings, Rings, right? Rings of Power series, there was some Bombadil. And I'll have a hot take about that shortly. But let's get the Bombadil basics covered first. Tom saves the hobbits, aforementioned tree, and then hosts them and sings the story and tells them the story of the world. I think they sing too. And Frodo asks him who he is. Now, Tom often speaks in the third person and names himself. He'll say things about himself. So he says to Frodo, and I think we should pay really careful attention to Tom here. He says, remember, this guy names himself often. He says, quote, "Don't you know my name yet?" That's the only answer. Yet people are always asking, who is Tom Bombadil? Well, that's already an answer. He is Tom Bombadil. If I meet somebody and they say, "Who are you?" I answer, "I am Larry." That's the answer. So when fans ask, who is Tom? But sometimes, by the way, when I say I'm Larry, they say, "Well, what's your last name?" "Well, I'm Larry Curtis." Tom's given them both names right away. So when fans ask, who is Tom Bombadil, they really know who he is. They just answer their own question. I think what they really mean is, what is Tom Bombadil? And if you pay careful attention, you hear someone ask that, and there's a discussion, or you can find it in online forums, probably forever. What follows the question, who is Tom Bombadil? Most of it actually focuses on, what is Tom Bombadil? Is he one of the demigods that created Middle-earth? Is he a powerful being like Gandalf or Sauron or Saruman? Is he something else like the Eagles that seem to be something else, or like Ungoliant, who seems to be something else? Again, just repeating, Tom says, "Don't you know my name yet?" That's the only answer. Now, in The Lord of the Rings, the free peoples and the other inhabitants of Middle-earth are clearly divided into groups. There's hobbits and elves and men and wizards and orcs, and goblins and dwarves and Gondorians and Easterlings, and everybody seems to have a classification. This kind of oversimplification about people and how we work in tribes has been much copied in Dungeons and Dragons and other places, putting fantasy readers, probably you if you have a Tolkien interest, probably me if I have a Tolkien interest, it puts fantasy readers or fantasy fans, we should say, even more into the mindset that everybody we meet in the fantasy world has a classification. It's too bad we can't hire, like in the real world, we can't find a level 1 plumber that we don't have to pay very much to get a new shower head, and then a level 10 plumber to fix our sewer leak. But things aren't that simple. That's really not how it works in the real world. So the classifications aren't so neat. Now, when the Silmarillion, so Tolkien published The Lord of the Rings in 1954, 1955. I think I say that every episode, but it's important, I think, to have context. So decades later, when the Silmarillion was published in 1977, we, fantasy readers, I say we, I was alive, but certainly not a reader, and I certainly wasn't looking forward to the Silmarillion, but meaning we, the greater nerd community, I guess, the greater Tolkien community. In 1977, when the Silmarillion was published, suddenly there was a full array of possible classifications of other beings in Arda who more closely aligned with the possibilities of Tom Bombadil, including the creators of Arda. Readers, Tolkienites, also learned who the elves really were and how we got them, how they came to Middle-earth, and who the dwarves really were and who was responsible for them, which plays into this very episode if we get to it, but I have a feeling we're not going to. So more than ever, readers wondered, what is Tom? Since that time, games, D&D included, will create rules and classifications to fit characters in that world. Dungeon masters will invent constraints or rules to govern everything and everybody, because they have to have hit points or damage, or their or their songs are D20 times 10 confusion. They cause confusion, or the same like effects as a mega level charm spell or something similar. Dungeon masters have to make everything kind of fit in the rules. Other games as well. I don't know. Are dungeon masters universal to games, or is that D&D only? I don't actually know. But we read Tolkien. Probably we're doing those games too, at least some of us. Or when we discuss the films, we aren't in a game. And Tolkien is the creator of Middle-earth in Arda. Middle-earth is the continent. Arda is the world, simplified. And he, the creator, intentionally doesn't tell us what Tom is. And as we will read, he actually told us to quit asking. So back to the Lord of the Rings. Frodo and company are rescued by Tom. They listen to Tom. They stay the night. They take bath. They stay the night. They're there all day. They don't even know how long they're there listening to Tom tell stories. And finally, Frodo says, "Who are you?" So Tom replies, reading from chapter 7 of Fellowship of the Ring, quote, "Don't you know my name yet?" I'm going to end the quote and talk. Tom introduces himself often and plainly and speaks in the third person. So he talks about himself. Tom Bombadil has yellow boots, even though it's Tom Bombadil speaking. So he says, "Don't you know my name yet?" I'm going to start this whole quote over, and I'll try not to interrupt myself. Quote, "Don't you know my name yet? That's the answer. Tell me, who are you? Alone, yourself, and nameless? But you are young, and I am old. Eldest, that's what I am. Mark my words, my friends. Tom was here before the river and the trees. Tom remembers the first raindrop and the first acorn. He made paths before the big people capitalized B big and P people and saw the little people arriving. He was here before the capital K kings and the Graves and the Barrow-wights. When the elves passed westward, Tom was here already, before the seas were bent. He knew the dark under the stars, when it was fearless, before the Dark Lord came from outside." Close quote. I promised to try to be brief, and I feel myself failing at this because of how interesting some of these words are. Not in some obscure text, but right there in Fellowship of the Ring, in Tom's own words, meaning in Tolkien's own words, there's some things that stand out. Two things that I want to highlight. That passage was published in 1954. And yet we can see right into the mind of J.R.R. Tolkien that he knew a lot about the history of Middle-earth, the continent in the world of Arda. Before the seas were bent, it says, is a clear reference to when a boat could sail from Middle-earth to Valinor or Valinor to Middle-earth. That's how Gandalf arrived, for example, on a boat. Or they could sail to the other way. You could sail from Middle-earth to Valinor, the home of the gods. But because of the rebellion of men, that was removed, and the world was made round with Valinor removed. No more access. So the home of, the equivalent of the gods was removed. And that's why Frodo needed high elves to bear him out of Middle-earth to reach the shores of Valinor to heal after being a ring bearer. And it's also why nobody could follow, including, should he have tried, Sam could not row his boat and follow. High elves required. Even more interesting, to me at least, although not unique to me, this isn't the only place you find this idea, but in the same quote, Tom says, quoting again, in bold, you can bold this quote in your brain, he knew the dark, Tom speaking third person about he knew the dark under the stars when it was fearless, before the Dark Lord came from outside, close quote. Tom was there in Middle-earth before not Sauron, well, also before Sauron, but before Sauron's baddie daddy Melkor, also named Morgoth. Tolkien loves to name people lots of things. Came from where the demigods lived, to Middle Earth. Before that, Middle Earth was in darkness. There was light, but it was no sun, no moon, and there was 2 trees very far away in Valinor. So it was dark, but the dark wasn't scary, or it wasn't fearful until the Dark Lord came from the outside. So Melkor arrived, bringing fear with him. To me, that's incredibly cool, and it's clear that Tolkien knew this history and dropped those hints very intentionally, maybe without a lot of hope that he would be able to fulfill what those things alluded to for readers. Let's make a clear distinction here about things inside Middle-earth and things outside Middle-earth, meaning in our world, in the world where you were listening to this podcast. Let's say that I, Larry D. Curtis, saved up $2,000, and I went down to the local tattoo shop, any number. It can be any number, but I saved up a bunch of money, and I went to the local tattoo shop, and I paid for a giant depiction of the One Ring, and it's, colored, shaded, it's detailed. Maybe there's an active volcano behind this depiction of the One Ring, or maybe there's a great flaming eye in the middle of this One Ring with its detailed inscription, and it's really all nice and beautiful and big, and it's on my back. So actually, if anybody wants to fund that, or if a tattoo artist wants some publicity, that would make a great couple of episodes of the Tolkien podcast, getting a big Tolkien tattoo. I actually would get a Middle-earth sword tattooed on my back, like for real, in honor of my youngest son. But for the sake of the point I'm making, let's say Larry, me, I don't want to talk like Tom. Let's say I got a giant ring on my back or my chest. Let's say that I did that, and here in the real world, and if anybody saw me, say at the local swimming pool, or I don't know, wherever you take off your shirt, let's at a swimming pool, and I have this giant ring tattooed on my body, they might say, "Oh, that's cool," or they might say, "Well, that's in terrible taste," or they might say I'm weird, or they might say I better get my 6-pack abs back before I go taking my shirt off in public. I would think that and say that. But if we moved me, Larry, inside Middle-earth, and I had that same tattoo, and I met, say, some elf lord, Glorfindel, I don't know, or some wizard, or even some hobbit, and I had that same tattoo, I now have a giant symbol of evil inked on my body, which would be more like in our world if I had a tattoo of Jesus hanging upside down on an upside down cross, or a pentagram with the skull of a goat inside. I'm talking big on my chest or my back. Or, this is good, or if it was a black swastika on a red field. Like, it's a whole different level of symbolism because of where it is, right? So the point is, the ring in our world, in podcast world, is a piece of Tolkien's fiction. It's like having Darth Vader on a t-shirt, like that you'd send your kid to school in. Darth Vader's evil, but it's a story. It's about Star Wars. But the One Ring in Middle-earth is different. It's a genuine tool that almost led to the ruin of everything. So having a tattoo of that would mark me as, like, at the very least, a cultist, maybe a worshiper of Sauron. And Tolkien used symbols like that a lot, like the Tree of the Kings, or the White Hand of Saruman. So symbols would matter, and if I had that tattoo symbol, there would really be something. So when we talk about Tom Bombadil, differentiating between those two places, we can talk about them on two different levels. One, inside Middle-earth, which is really just us imagining ourselves inside J.R.R. Tolkien's imagination, which, when we say what was Tom Bombadil, that's a different question than there. Nobody knows, anything about who J.R.R. Tolkien is. And, good luck explaining inside Middle-earth to, say, King Theoden and saying, hey, actually, you were invented by some guy outside of this reality, and it was his decision, not Saruman's, to cloud your mind and have the White Wizard control Rohan, right? So King Theoden would never understand that because he's living in Middle-earth. On the other hand, in the world we live in, the one with this podcast, we can also ask, what was Tom Bombadil? And to answer the question here, we can then examine the life of Tolkien and the things he wrote and his children and their toys and his religious background and where he lived and his love of language, even his literary and mythic inspirations, which as I'm watching the clock, I know we're not going to get to in this episode. So we are going to discuss both the inside and outside. The gaming crowd wants to know, inside Arda, what is Tom? Why can he handle the One Ring with no temptation? Or why to use it or to control it? Why, when Frodo lets him examine it, can he put it on and he doesn't disappear? And in fact, why can he literally make the ring turn invisible if he chooses? Well, the answer is, actually incredibly simple. And Tom told us in what we just read. Quote, eldest, that's what I am. End quote. And that doesn't mean he is God, but we will look at that very specifically in a few minutes too. Then he details exactly how old he is. He witnessed the first raindrop and he witnessed the first acorn. He is older by far than the One Ring, older than Sauron turning bad, older than the trees. He has observed all this without taking part in any of it. So that's it. Inside Middle-earth, that's the answer. That isn't what gamers want, but that's it. He is an intelligence or a being that is older than all those things and wasn't part of that creation. He appears nowhere in the Silmarillion, Tolkien's creation story. He simply is. He is Tom Bombadil. And he elaborates, saying clearly, he is the eldest. After Tom assists the hobbits and gets them on their way to Bree with ponies and supplies and little daggers, or actually daggers, not little daggers, elven-made daggers, Tom is mentioned again at the Council of Elrond by Gandalf and Elrond. So, the wise beings of Middle-earth are aware of Tom. Then in Return of the King, Gandalf says he's going to have a long chat with Tom. We don't see the chat. We never meet Bombadil again in any work except 2 poems, one published before all this even started. So let's jump outside Middle-earth. We just talked about all the things inside. Tom just is Tom Bombadil. So let's jump outside Middle-earth to the place this podcast exists, where we can look at Tolkien himself and give further answers, including, I think, the one that most succinctly sums up what Tom Bombadil is. But first, we're just going to turn to the dictionary because everyone says enigma all the time, and maybe that's not clear to everybody what that is. Enigma is, quote, a person, thing, or situation that is mysterious and difficult to understand, close quote. So to Tolkien, here in podcast world, where we can go visit his tombstone if we want to, Tom was meant to be, intentionally made by his creator, an enigma, a person, thing, or situation that is mysterious and difficult to understand. From the pen of J.R.R. Tolkien himself, in the collection of his letters, numbered letter 144, written in April 1954, Tolkien says, quote, even in a mythical age, there must be some enigmas, as there always are. Tom Bombadil is one intentionally, close quote. If you're not 100% clear, you probably can catch on. There was just a letter from Tolkien, but a lot of his correspondence, sent and some unsent, has been collected into the letters of Tolkien. And a lot of those letters were to people who were writing, asking questions about Middle-earth. Some were to friends who were asking questions about Middle-earth. But there's quite a lot of insight from the author himself. And, sometimes a person who makes a creative work has time to kind of think about it more, and some of those answers were probably always there, and some kind of happened as Tolkien was asked these questions. So, letter 144, April 1954, Tolkien says that Bombadil is intentionally an enigma. In a letter to Neville Coghill, who happens to have been a member of the Inklings with Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. If you're not familiar with the Inklings, Google it. And you can Google Coghill while you're at it. We're not going to touch it, but he's an interesting guy. This is a quote, again, Tolkien writing to Coghill. Quote, "But Tom Bombadil is just as he is, just an odd fact of that world. He won't be explained, because as long as you are meant to be, concentrated on the ring, he is inexplicable, but he's there. A reminder of the truth, as I see it, that the world is so large and manifold that if you take one facet and fix your mind and heart on it, there is always something that does not come into that story," close quote. Coghill, incidentally, was a professor of English literature at Oxford from 57 to 66. And yes, I definitely had to look that up. I wouldn't know, but worth knowing. Tolkien hung out with some smart people, including C.S. Lewis. So letter 153, September 1954, quote, "I don't think Tom needs philosophizing about and is not improved by it. But many have found him an odd or indeed discordant." Highlight that word discordant, what that would mean in your mind. "Odd or indeed discordant ingredient. In historical fact, I put him in because I had already invented him independently. He first appeared in the Oxford magazine and wanted an adventure on the way." Remember this quote from Tolkien. Tom was included in Middle-earth, quote, "because I had already invented him independently," close quote. So Tolkien himself delivered the important info there, as clear as can be, that the character Tom Bombadil was published in the magazine, the Oxford magazine, in 1934, years before The Hobbit was published, although it had been started being written in 1930. It's a quick, easy reading poem if you care to seek it out. I thought maybe I would read it here, but this is not a short episode, so I'm not going to. But it's easy to find and worth reading, really easy to read and easy to understand, even amusing. So we've established that inside Middle-earth, Tom said he was the eldest, already created before Middle-earth was. Tom calls himself the eldest, but also Glorfindel calls him the first, and Tom's elvish name means oldest and fatherless, which I think fits perfectly as we've... Here in the podcast world, where we know who Tolkien is, we see that Tom was already created and the eldest, and he was around when Tolkien was creating the first acorn. Now, speaking of the outside world, out of Middle-earth, we live in a time when J.R.R. Tolkien is a celebrated literary figure, not just a guy who wrote a book. And there are lots of creative works made around Tolkien. In 2023, in the UK, a £2, and I mean the monetary value of pounds, not the weight pounds, a £2 coin was minted to commemorate the life of J.R.R. Tolkien, who died 50 years before that in 1973. At kellyannie.com, Kelly, Annie, ANNIE.com, the first sponsor of the Tolkien podcast that you're listening to, a craftswoman creates and sells handmade jewelry that she makes from coins from around the world. She's created a Tolkien necklace using that beautiful 2023 UK issued £2 coin. So you can wear your Tolkien fandom around your neck in beautiful jewelry, or excuse me. If you know someone who loves Tolkien, you can give an amazing piece of jewelry to your favorite Tolkien fan. It's the kind of thing that makes that unique, unmatched gift that nobody else gives, nobody else thought of. It comes with a 20-inch matte gold fill chain. I've seen this in person, and maybe I'll get a picture, but I'll definitely get a link. And a lobster claw clasp. Visible is the Tolkien monogram that maybe lots of people know. I think it's pretty well known these days. This particular one created by artist David Lawrence. The link will be up so you can support the Tolkien podcast with this custom-made jewelry, and it comes with a Tolkien quote. Now, these are custom-made, so they do sell out, but really big thanks to kellyannie.com. If you go there and you look under Great Britain, you'll see that in the list, but I will put the link so you'll be able to find it easily. If you listen to the Tolkien podcast episode, there's an earlier episode about what order to read Tolkien's works. And there are those who claim, I've said this then, I'll say it now, that the order of publication is the best way to read. And that would mean the 1934 poem, The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, would be the first thing that you read, which I'm not reading here, but super easy. You probably can find it online, but definitely it's published. It's available. I will say what I wish I could get my hands on is a copy of that, the Oxford Review. I can't even remember what it's called now. Nervous. Oxford magazine. There's several good library collections of Tolkien's papers. Marquette has probably the best. Oxford has some great ones, but this 1934 publication with the poem is somewhere else that I can't remember. It doesn't matter. At the time that it was published, Tolkien had no idea what the story of the Lord of the Rings was at all, and Tom was deliberately not placed in The Hobbit. So, review. Tom bails out his house guests, the hobbits, when they fall into the clutches of a Barrow-wight. That same creature is in the original Tom Bombadil poem, and Tom sings him out of his house. Let me read the words when Tom intervenes to save the hobbits from this certain undead doom. Reading it to give you a flavor of Tom. Quote, "Old Tom Bombadil is a merry fellow. Bright blue his jacket is, and his boots are yellow. None has ever caught him yet, for Tom, he is the master. His songs are stronger songs, and his feet are faster." That's the tone Tom Bombadil uses when he's chasing off or singing off a Barrow-wight, a deadly undead creature that would absolutely have mastered the hobbits in moments, if not for Tom. But besides singing jolly songs all the time and dressing in bright colors and putting feathers in his hat, we intentionally, by the creator, don't know much about him. I mentioned before, he comes up at the Council of Elrond. Gandalf says if he was given the One Ring, he wouldn't care about it and would probably just misplace it. And Elrond says that if Bombadil were forced to confront Sauron, Tom would be overpowered. Tolkien, now out of Middle-earth again, Tolkien said Tom was, quote, "not an important person to the narrative," end quote, even though, quote, "he represents," handled that badly, "he represents something that I feel important, though I would not be prepared to analyze the feeling precisely," close quote. And by the way, Jackson and Bakshi were all exactly correct. They made the right decision to exclude Tom from the movie adaptations. While awesome in a book, Tom's story is a big pause in the goal of our protagonist, and he would bog down the film. And I know fans clamor for him, but it is the right decision for a movie. Tolkien scholar Verlin Flieger said that Tom is entirely free of the desire to dominate, and hence cannot be dominated. My words, Tom doesn't care about the things of the world, Middle-earth. So the things of the world don't have power over him. He is completely removed from them. He has joy in certain things and their discovery, like botany and science, but he has no desire to manipulate, which makes him actually the absolute counterpoint to Sauron. Tolkien said in a letter to his publisher that Tom was, quote, "spirit of the vanishing Oxford and Berkshire countryside." So inside Middle-earth, Tom is an intentional mystery, specifically a designed enigma. Outside of Middle-earth, Tom is a creation of Tolkien's that predated Middle-earth completely, that the guy who made him called inexplicable and was used to show a wider world with questions that can't be answered, highlighting that the story of the War of the Ring is not the whole of everything. In 1937, The Hobbit was published. As readers and the publisher of The Hobbit later demanded a sequel, Christopher Tolkien, the greatest Tolkien scholar in the world, noted that his father's early notes about the sequel, in those notes, Tom was present. I know this is feeling like shoehorned in, but it can't be left unsaid. Speaking of Christopher and Tolkien's children, they all played when they were young with a Dutch doll, which would be, for boys, like the equivalent of an action figure in today's terms, imaginative play. And it was called Tom Bombadil. It was a toy, a figure of the Tolkien family fancy. One time it was attempted to be flushed down a toilet, but was rescued. So now, in more current events, definitely in this century at least, old Tom Bombadil made an appearance in a big budget TV series. Amazon famously paid $250 million just for the rights to develop a series based on the Lord of the Rings, which means, in practical terms, that the content from the things between the front cover of the book and the back cover of the book, which includes the appendices in the back of the book, where there is a lot of material to be mined. Now, some listeners probably love this series. And if you do, I'm delighted that you do. I don't want to dissuade anyone from experiencing joy and in really appreciating creative work. TV show, movie, book, painting, photograph, whatever. However, I am not among those that love the series. And in all honesty, my enthusiasm was low enough. I think I just mispronounced enthusiasm. My enthusiasm was low enough after season 1 that I never got around to watching season 2 at all. I have an Amazon account. I always thought I would get around to it, but I never got around to it. I'm a journalist by trade. And I've watched, as film journalism has turned into film promotion in publications, even in publications like that are well known for film journalism. When Esquire or Empire or GQ or other high profile publications do profiles on movies or big budget television, complete with exclusive photos and high level interviews, they sell a lot of copies. And we, the consumers, are reading promotional material that comes disguised to us as exclusive first looks, quote marks around that. HBO did this on air, like for decades. They would have, HBO exclusive first looks. Well, it would just have video of, somebody behind the scenes being like, whoa, this movie's really cool, man. It's pretty much the same. These journalists are there on set and doing, kind of promotional content. That isn't a hatred for the form. I'm not saying any of that to be negative. That's what it is. That's just me being honest about what that is. Advanced information and set access are given or exchanged, and photos are given and exchanged to a reporter who benefits from the exclusive, as does their publication. The show or the movie then gets high-profile press, which is really valuable and really important. And let's be honest, it's always positive press, or at worst, it's kind of neutral. You're not ever reading these pieces about movies or TV shows that say, this show is doomed. It just doesn't happen. Nerds, I'm saying we, are big business at the box office. And so, and streaming services. And so they studios court us. Last September, The Hollywood Reporter, pretty prestigious mainstream press, covers Hollywood, pretty important publication, did a preview of Rings of Power Season 2 by focusing on a really tease-worthy, attention-grabbing concept. This. Tom Bombadil gets on screen. Finally! The actual headline said, The Rings of Power, creators on making Tom Bombadil cool. Quotes, I get chills when he says that, end quotes, with a picture of Rory Kinnear as Tom. Subhead, Showrunners J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay talk about bringing the tricky-to-adapt character to life and striking a balance between J.R.R. Tolkien's creation and their grounded depiction. We have arrived at the opinion portion of this episode. I do not, by the way, see this podcast focused on reviews now or in the future. I guess it could evolve into that, but that's not the intention. There are Lord of the Rings fans out there who just want the name Tolkien or Middle-earth stamped on a product, and they will consume it. And that would include, I don't know, Middle-earth Oreos marked now with extra limbus or something, and they would get in line to buy them, and that's totally fine. They're welcome to spend their money however they want. If that makes them happy, that's great. Now, personally, I want my Middle-earth content to be excellent every time, all the time. It isn't always. I know it isn't always going to be, but that's what I'm looking for. The standard for Middle-earth stuff ought to be pretty high. Almost always when it isn't, it's because the creators didn't trust Tolkien. And when it is, it's usually because the creators did trust Tolkien. And that is not to say that adaptations are not required for different mediums. I don't believe that at all. But there is a reason Tolkien's works remain popular for nearly 90 years now. So I think it behooves the creatives to understand why Tolkien is successful, or why a certain story works, or why a character works and is still popular, and then to do their best to translate that to film or TV. But I'm not sure that's happening. I think what's often being asked about productions, fantasy or Tolkien specifically, is why was Jackson's Lord of the Rings movies so popular? And then attempts are made to do what Jackson did. And I see that a lot visually and in other ways. That's not great. Trust Tolkien. I mean, my opinion, right? But I also don't see the value in running down what other people love. So if they get joy from TV, great. It's not my job. It's not my wish to tell them they shouldn't enjoy something. But at the same time, it's also not my job or my wish to swallow my observations. And it might actually be my job. It's not officially my job, but what I think I should do is to tell people that are in the business of adapting Tolkien to strive for greatness, not to strive for financial greatness. So if you love the show, if you love Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, keep loving the show, please. I support you. But as homework for this podcast episode, I took it upon myself to go watch Rings of Power Season 2, or at least the parts with Tom Bombadil in it. That character, that same character from that obscure 1934 poem that we've been talking about. There's probably some minor spoilers ahead for Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power Season 2, but I didn't watch enough of it, I don't think, to have there be major spoilers. But I did watch those Bombadil scenes, so if you don't want to know about them, don't listen. Let's be clear, if Tom Bombadil is one thing in his poems and in the Lord of the Rings, in his own words, he's one thing. He is a merry fellow. He doesn't care about the ring. He doesn't care about the affairs around him. He is pre-Raindrop and pre-Acorn and pre-Melkor. So he's a merry fellow. Underline, exclamation point. I thought Kinnear, a really good actor that I really admire, a great actor that I admire, was suited to the role, like it fit him well. It was a good pick. And if I had a movie, I'd want him to be in it. I had not watched, as I said, any of season 2 previously, but I settled in to watch the parts in a couple of episodes. And while doing that, I caught other parts. So I strangely had a powerful sensation that I was watching season 1 plot points that were still not resolved in season 2, which felt weird and frustrating. And on that particular point, I was just dumbfounded that that's what season 2 was doing, that I was still... Tom is seen on screen first in almost what I would call a wasteland. Maybe they wouldn't, but that's what I would say. And as far as I can tell, the only reason he's there is for fan service, seemingly almost entirely with the point of creating hype for the show. Finds Gandalf... Oh, wait, I mean the stranger... He finds the stranger wandering around looking for a staff so he can be a proper wizard. Meanwhile, the stranger is protecting two halflings who haven't, I don't know, I just don't love some of the design choices, but that they seem to have not combed their hair since season 1. And I like the actresses and I liked those characters in season 1, but they're still hanging around doing the same thing without combing their hair or seemingly taking the leaves out of them or whatever. And naturally, the stranger is quite fond of these two halflings because, nudge nudge audience, wink wink audience, later a wizard, possibly Gandalf, will be fond of halfling. Then listen, I'm not trying to be rude, but the shockingly incompetent stranger, I'm still really? From season 1, this guy's still like that? He accidentally gets himself half swallowed by a tree because, wink again, nudge again, later some hobbits, specifically Merry and Pippin, will also get swallowed by a tree. In both instances, a bearded fellow, this one I think I heard muttering under his breath, Merry doll, tells the tree to drink deep. And I think I heard that too, but I don't know. It didn't make sense. I didn't rewind it and write it down, but that's what I thought I heard. And the tree, in both instances, when Tom sings to it or talks to it, lets the poor fools that are inside it go. This tree isn't a willow, thankfully. I'm grateful for that. So more winks and nudges, and this super enigmatic fellow takes the stranger to his house to give him a bath, because Tom Bombadil loves to give guests baths, I guess. And the bewildered stranger just completely stumped in this tub, who is, I will remind you, one of the wisest and most powerful beings, and in fact helped sing Middle-earth to life. He sits completely befuddled in this tub. At least he seems befuddled to me and confused. And he asks Tom who Tom is. Now, Tom answers with words that will probably be familiar if you've listened to this whole episode of this podcast, but he says, "Eldest, that's what I am," or something very similar to it. It's the same speech. And I know, it's forgivable because his reply to Frodo in his own house, thousands of years, an age later, never made it on screen. But really? Is he rehearsing? Is Tom Bombadil rehearsing his speech? Peter Jackson's team famously lifted dialogue from parts of the book and dropped it in other parts of the Lord of the Rings film. So I'm not against that practice, but that's pretty much what happened here. And goodness gracious, it felt so clumsy to me to have him, I don't know, because we know Frodo's going to come later and he's going to say the same thing because we read the book, because that's how we know about Bombadil. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be excited about Bombadil. But anyway, praise to Rory Kinner, who was just really good at reading those lines, which seemed painfully out of place. So the eldest is also the most repetitive, I guess. I don't know. It's forgivable. I get why they did it. But, Tom's kind of iconic speech needs to be in there somewhere, I guess. What I found less forgivable than that, though, is that damn it, the stranger then falls into conversation with Bombadil at a later point, I think even in the next episode, about how he feels powerless or he's disheartened or something. His quest for a staff isn't going very well. So the very serious Tom Bombadil hands him a platitude about wizard staff and a wizard's heart, which okay. But in the scene, the writing team takes Gandalf's words, and I definitely mean Gandalf this time, Gandalf's words to Frodo in the Mines of Moria from Peter Jackson's movies. Now, Jackson borrowed those same words from Chapter 2 of Fellowship of the Ring and moved them from Bilbo's house to Moria, to the Moria sequence, and to great effect. I'm pro that. Well done. Now we have Bombadil saying the same words to these bewildered, but also the wisest and among the most powerful beings in Arda, and says, "Many who live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Who are you to give it to them?" So slightly changed. Well, not only have we punched holes or punched the character of Gandalf in the face by later now we've made it so Gandalf's quoting Tom virtually word for word thousands of years later in troubled times. This wisest of all beings seemingly doesn't have his own vocabulary to bolster Middle Earth, to make people have courage, which is the whole reason he's there for. He just parrots Bombadil, we find out later. So it punches Gandalf in the face, and it kind of punches that whole scene in the Jackson movies in the face, or if you prefer, it punches the scene in the book in the face. That was a really poor use of dialogue, and we've already heard it. Either we know the book, or we know Jackson's work, or we know both, and we recognize his word for word thing. And I don't know, fans, if you think that's really cute. I don't think that's cute at all. There just was not a moment where I was, tickled at my TV screen because I heard identical dialogue in different ages of Middle Earth. But not only have we punched Gandalf by making him quote Tom word for word thousands of years later, we've done something radically different with Tom here. Tom is never presented as wise or a counselor by Tolkien. In fact, he is most definitely a merry fellow who doesn't care at all about the things of the world. He's so careless that he will probably lose the ring if it's given to him. In fact, Tom has little or no interest in leaving his little realm there by the old forest. Now, maybe, I acknowledge, maybe this being that's older than the world itself previously did travel. I don't know what he was doing in the Second Age. No one does. So it's plausible that he was out, stomping around dead lands, but there are absolutely no indicators that he did do this. I guess there's none that he didn't. I'm not being too critical of that, but it's definitely not the Tom we meet later. Tolkien's Tom gets a little bit serious when he gives that speech about he is the eldest, but that's about himself only. And he doesn't presume to give Frodo, who happens to be carrying the most dangerous item in the whole age of Middle Earth, any advice about anything or about that, other than to avoid walking on the wrong side of a burial mound so he doesn't get captured by a Barrow-wight. Now, via Amazon, Tom has been established as a counselor to Gandalf, and this is actually such he's so wise that the wisdom he gives Gandalf, a phrase, is so good that the wizard carries it around for thousands of years, saving it for the day when he can regurgitate it on a hobbit. And now Tom isn't a figure, not of this world or Arda. He's no longer outside of that. He's no longer a character who exists outside of it. He is very much the opposite. He is now there to heavily influence or to guide a hopelessly confused Gandalf. And also to counsel Gandalf, who, I know I just said this, I'll remind you again, helped sing the world into existence before he was sent by even the higher level characters on a mission to help elves and men. Somehow Tom, the point of whom is to be inexplicable or an enigma, now is explainable. And now he plays a vital role in preparing the stranger, whoever that might be, to lead the resistance to Sauron. Now, Tom Bombadil is not a merry fellow. He is a gravely serious fellow, and a foundation of wisdom that we can't possibly imagine would misplace the One Ring during the Third Age. Back to journalism. We hear in this Hollywood Reporter story from a few months ago that Bombadil is the wise trickster, like Yoda, they say. Well, that's interesting. And they definitely have made him wise. I just said that. And they definitely made him invested in the outcome of Middle-earth, both of which completely go against everything we know about his character. And what's more, in this episode, he's there to test Gandalf, to tell Gandalf he's at a crossroads and all Middle-earth hangs in the balance. Now I quote from the Hollywood Reporter. The dialogue in the fourth episode, however, hints that Bombadil might be even more than your happy-go-lucky immortal being hanging out in Middle-earth. You start to wonder, is Tom Bombadil basically God? Is he the top-level boss of Middle-earth? That's, end quote, that's from the Hollywood Reporter. That's the writer, the reporter's voice. Now, quote, "We would have no problem if that question was being asked," Payne says, "because people say that about the character in the books." McKay adds, "And I think people ask that of Tolkien himself. Tolkien chose to remain silent on it, and so shall we." Close quote, end article. Well, bad news. People did ask Tolkien that, and the professor most definitely did not remain silent on the matter. In fact, he emphatically denied it. Letter 181, quote, "There is no embodiment of the One, of God, who indeed remains remote, outside the world, and only directly accessible to the Valar or rulers. There is no embodiment of the Creator anywhere in this story or mythology." Close quote for a minute while I say that this is from a much longer letter, and I've pulled the parts that are most pertinent, but they're very clear. So I'm going to continue. Quote, "The incarnation of God is an infinitely greater thing than anything I would dare to write." Close quote. But perhaps not greater than the Amazon writing team would be willing and daring to write. And it does bother me that they compare their handling in that article of Tom Bombadil to how Tolkien handled him, when in fact it is the opposite of how Tolkien handled him, and the polar opposite of how Tolkien talked about him. Not here to run down the show. I am here to express what I found and thought about the handling of Tom Bombadil. In fairness, I watched half of the finale of season 2 as well, the first half, and I may yet watch the rest. And there were some things in that half an episode that I really liked. I'm not here reviewing the show, but I am here saying, in my opinion, they dragged a character into the story that should have been left out of the story for what feels to me like a media bump. And that's a strategy I'm not a fan of. Though I have no insight into the motives and work process, obviously nobody invited me on set. Nobody gave me an interview. Nobody consulted. Whatever. I don't know anything. I don't know what I'm talking about. But that's what it seems like to me. And now we know for sure that Amazon is not inviting me to the company picnic or the press junket for Rings of Power Season 3. So I guess you can trust me to be completely honest about the show, although it's not something I'm going to choose to talk about very often. Probably I should watch it. For the record, I always hope for the success of the Amazon show. I hope season 2 is much better than 1, and I hope season 3 is much better than 2. I hope it succeeds critically. I hope it succeeds as art, as storytelling, as an adaptation of Tolkien. I hope for all that. One thing I did do, though, is skipped to the credits, because I've noticed that the actors' pronunciation of Tolkien names has been very good. It's a thing that's hard for me, but I've noticed they're very good at it. And I thought I could practically hear my friend Leith McPherson coaching the actors. I don't mean literally I could hear her. Obviously, that would be comical and bad. But I mean, I could hear her voice through their voices. And sure enough, there she is, right in the credits. This brilliant, intelligent woman who knows how to say Tolkien's name and understands his languages and his pronunciation and his speech, but also knows how to teach others to say these things correctly. So kudos to Amazon for getting Leith, and kudos to Leith for doing her job really well. Well, not only was this not a short episode of the podcast, it's the longest episode of the podcast. But one more time, I want to sum up Tom Bombadil. Inside Middle-earth, Tom Bombadil is an unexplainable enigma that somehow comes from outside creation, an ancient being that simply is. Inside our podcast world, reality, where we all live, Tom is an Easter egg planted by the creator J.R.R. Tolkien for his children. Tom is the gift of a father, which is beautiful indeed. And I know this will not stop the Bombadil chatter, but I hope for somebody, somewhere, that's enough of an answer. It is for me. Reach me at TheTolkienPodcast@gmail.com. And if you made it all this way, support the podcast by telling one other person about it. And if you need a most amazing Tolkien necklace, go to kellyannie.com and browse the coins from Great Britain or the jewelry from Great Britain. I will provide a link. Look for it. May a star shine on the hour of our next meeting. How's that? Is that a good Tolkien phrase? Is that a good sign off? May a star shine on the hour of our next meeting. Hope that's good. I don't know. I don't have a good sign out. Listen, I'll tell you a true thing about this podcast. I'm really not into like great grand musical intros. I just want to jump right into it all the time. So probably I could produce this thing better, but I just want to get going. Anyway, the ending is the same. I probably ought to sign off. I probably ought to, may music make your life better every day. I don't know what it is, but that's not bad. May a star shine on the hour of our next meeting. My name is Larry, definitely not the eldest, but definitely a guy with a lot to say about Tolkien. This has been episode 6 of the Tolkien Podcast.